The chair will call to order the November meeting of the Juvenile Detention Center Board meeting. The chair detects a quorum. Ms. Todd, if you will call the roll, please.
Mayor Joe Paul.
Here.
Judge Steve Daniel.
Here.
Leslie Cole.
Here.
Claire Maxwell.
Here.
Michael McDonald.
Here.
Thank everybody for attending today. A couple of points of order. I want to recognize Judge Lampley for being with us again. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Your attendance is always very much appreciated.
Thank you, Pete.
And Nick Christian, County Attorney, thank you for being here as well. And County Commissioner Joshua James, thank you for being here. Before we get started, well, let's do this. Let's approve the minutes, and then I want to have a brief discussion about the approval of the minutes going forward, if we might. Has the committee read the minutes, and do they find them in order? If so, can I have a motion and a second?
I move approval of the minutes for
Second.
October 10th, 2022.
And we have a
Second.
motion and a second. Are there any objections? If not, all those in favor say aye for approval.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. I would like to stay here for just a second, if I might. I think the committee, there's been a question raised about how we go about the approval process of the minutes, and I would like to open that up for discussion. I can say from experience on other committees, typically there is a member of the committee that approves the minutes on behalf of the committee. We can undertake it to do it in that way, or we can leave it to the individual members to approve the individual minutes. The chair has no preference either way.
My thought was that the only thing I thought they were well prepared. I commend Ms. Todd for
Thank you, Ms. Todd.
her work. But in my previous experience, the committee got an opportunity to read them and have an opportunity to either amend them before they voted on them. And these were filled out and completed and signed. It was all done, which, if that's the process, that's fine.
No, that was the process for those minutes. That's literally the point of this discussion, is to determine what the process needs to be per this committee. So if we want to undertake a little different process, by all means, we need to do that. And the chair is certainly open to that discussion and amending that process to the satisfaction of the committee.
Well, I would suggest that they be sent out and given an opportunity to respond to them and see if there's any additions or corrections before they're actually printed and signed.
No objection from, yes, Ms. Cole.
Sent out as a draft.
Right.
Yeah, no objection. Sheila, let me ask you a question, if I may. As a process, how long does it take you to take because if you're having an hour and a half, 2-hour meeting, the minutes of the meeting are rather significant. How much time do you need to put the minutes together in the form of a draft to send to the committee member meetings so they can then respond or make the necessary corrections that they deem are necessary?
Well, I try and have them out I would try and have them out by the end of this week.
Oh, okay, so you
Yes.
could have them out within a week's
Yes.
time.
And the reason I sent it out this way, this is the example that was sent to me.
Yes.
So however you all want me to do it is fine.
Nick, is there a particular methodology here that is a standard operating procedure on the part of the county or other committees?
What I would probably suggest is, I think it's totally fine to have the members review the draft of minutes that are prepared prior to the meeting. And
Yes.
if there are any changes that need to be made, then the members should come to the board meeting the next month and suggest an amendment to the minutes. And that can be done in the form of a motion to amend them per the suggestion or change of the member. And if that amendment is approved, then you would take the next step at that same meeting of approving the now amended minutes.
It puts a lot of time constraints on the recorder. My suggestion would be that we simply respond if we agree with them or any suggestions so that she can go ahead and prepare them.
Yeah, the only issue with that, though, is we're having deliberations, not in a public meeting, about changing things and deciding things as a group to change the minutes, which that's why I simply raised if there are any changes going to be done, that should be brought to the meeting and discussed openly. And I understand.
It's not a matter of changing them, it's clarifications of what we agreed on. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Sure. That's, again, my suggestion from a legal perspective would be that if there are changes that the board wants to make, instead of deliberating them via email or making the suggestions and coming to an agreement via email about making those changes, that they be brought to the board at the next meeting and suggested and voted upon. Then that would be my suggestion.
I would prefer to follow the suggestion of the county attorney because I want to err on the side of caution for transparency's sake. If we find that is unsatisfactory going forward, we can always raise the issue again. But I want to make sure that we're transparent in the process with regard to all matters that concern the matters of the Juvenile Detention Center and its oversight.
I have a question. I guess I should direct it to our attorney. What is the role of RCTV in terms of incorporating our minutes, our draft minutes, and making it a part of the formal, I guess, deliberations?
Do you mean the video camera and whatnot?
As far as, yeah, what the RCTV, the coverage, is there a way that we can incorporate that into our minutes?
Well,
Or how is that typically handled?
so courts, when they're reviewing actions of a board, they always say that the board speaks through its written minutes.
Okay.
So the record of the board is what is memorialized in your written minutes.
Okay,
The access via cable is a big benefit to the taxpayers of Rutherford County because it provides access to those who can't otherwise come and might want to hear the full breadth of the meeting. And so that provides access not only, I think, live, but also for posterity's sake if they need to look at the video months or years down the road.
okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, if once the draft is sent out to all of the board members, if everybody says, this looks good, I approve of these minutes, it's all good, can then we move forward with that, or should we wait until the next meeting?
Based on what Nick is telling the committee, then if a draft is sent out and there are no amendments to the draft, then those minutes are then adopted at the next board meeting. If
Just like you did right here, Mayor.
Correct, that's correct. If there are, based on the example given by the county attorney, if there are changes or amendments or clarifications to be made, those need to be made at the next board meeting, and then those amendments or changes would be adopted, and then the minutes would then be adopted as amended, if I understand what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
So then what I report to public safety as far as the minutes of
Are
this board,
are the adopted
which
minutes.
will be a month or two behind.
Yeah.
Okay,
Not-
I just-
Yes, that is
All
correct.
right.
So you can't present to the commission
What
nothing-
hasn't been
what hasn't been
adopted.
adopted.
Okay.
That's correct.
So there's no signatures on what's sent to us. In other words, because we've got a time frame.
That's correct.
Move to amend. The signatures of yourself
That's correct.
and Ms. Duke come after the approval.
Yes, sir.
The next month.
That's sir.
Okay.
So is it necessary for the board at large to sign off on these minutes, or is just?
You would be signing off on the minutes upon your approval of the
Okay.
minutes at the appropriate meeting.
Okay,
The board would.
Yes.
That's what you just said. Yes, nothing to add, Mayor. That's right.
I guess I was making reference more to signatory on,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, generally, the chair of a committee is the one that's going to sign,
Okay.
actually sign minutes, but as Mayor Carter stated, he wouldn't do so until the board has
Okay.
made a motion to approve them and they've been approved.
okay, thank you. Okay.
We need a motion to approve we need a motion to, of the process defining how the minutes are approved. The chair cannot make an emotion.
I move that Ms. Todd send out a draft to all the board members with enough time for everyone to look it over before the next meeting. And if there are additions or corrections, that those issues be brought up at the meeting and voted on.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Ms. Cullen. The third is the SOP policy discussion. So, Ms. Duke, I guess I'm going to put that in your basket.
All right, so at the
Thank you.
last meeting, we had discussion as to whether the county attorney's office had had an opportunity to look at the SOP, and the board members wanted an opportunity to do so. The last item that was sent was a proposed updated SOP with the attorney's approval, and also a red line copy to show what changes had been made throughout.
Any discussion?
Well, I'm not ready to, if you're asking for approval of the SOP as presented, I'm not prepared to do that.
No, sir, I am not.
Okay, what are you asking for?
I'm asking for discussion.
About the SOP generally, or?
Yes, sir. The assumption of the chair here is this is going to be an ongoing discussion, and we may have to parse this out a bit to move forward. But that, again, this is up to the committee to determine the process by which we're going to review the SOP, which is a large part of what this body was designed to do. And so I want to just begin that process. I don't anticipate us completing that process today by a stretch. I hope we can begin that process. So this is to begin that process in the form of discussion.
What SOP are we currently operating under?
We are operating under the one that you received at the first meeting.
Is that the one dated October?
Yes.
2020, okay.
Yes.
Now, is that, or does that document reflect any revisions, I guess, subsequent to the SOP that was in place that may have related to the litigation?
The October SOP removed any questionable language
Okay.
that was involved in that litigation.
Well, I think we need to exercise due diligence here and take the time to kind of go through this. And it may take a month, may take whatever time is necessary. And that may be something we do if we create a board retreat. I know that's one of the things that may be on the agenda. So I would move that we, I don't know if the term is table it or just have it moved to the next meeting to discuss.
Are you suggesting that we have a retreat just to discuss the SOP?
I'm suggesting that we have a retreat to figure out a way to flush out a myriad of issues that we're facing and to try to create some kind of priority as it relates to how it may impact on the center, the staff, and the like. My sense is that with time being compressed as it is with our regular meetings, this is the type of issue that is very important, and I just think we need more time for constructive engagement with it.
Well, last time, Michael, you asked Mr. Christensen a question. Was there I think you used the term consent decree in the federal litigation.
That is exactly right.
And he responded, and I don't know if he understood the question exactly, but he responded there was no consent decree. And there is, though, a settlement decree of December of last year.
Right. 2021.
And I'm going to furnish that to everyone this afternoon. I was able to get it electronically. It's about 175 pages. As a part of that, then I asked the question, what criticisms were they made by the court concerning the detention center? And I'm sure he didn't quite understand my questions, because in this particular consent decree, there's an injunction in effect until December of next year that would prevent, well, two parts of it, really. One prevents detention based on some kind of filtering system, which I really don't understand, quite frankly. And the second part of it is a requirement that the provisions of basic probable cause be determined in accordance with TCA 37-1-114C1. And in that situation, the way I understand the code is the issuing person is asking for immediate custody because of the various categories under that subsection of delinquent acts. And it requires a probable cause determination. So this is always an issue associated with criminal cases, in this case, juvenile cases, because probable cause is an important barrier to citizens being detained. And due process under both federal and state constitutions require a heightened examination before somebody is detained. There's two different types of entities that make that probable cause determination. In this county, you have generally judicial commissioners. Now, they're not necessarily law trained. In fact, in Rutherford County, we only have one that's a licensed lawyer. It's my understanding.
Okay.
The other second type of person who would make that determination is a judge or judicial magistrate. So my discussion, we had a tour and I talked with Ms. Duke, and we've had this colloquy across emails last week, in compliance with this order, before somebody is detained initially, in other words, on lead process, does this current SOP require the juvenile judge or juvenile magistrates to make that determination? In other words, probable cause, such that they would be immediately detained. Not a judicial commissioner, because if I understand the facts right, that was the problem in the first place. And either the judicial commissioner did not understand their role, or they didn't do it well enough as well, and it gave rise to somebody being, or more than one people being detained without that process going through. So, an educational process would be that if we're going to go and reach this SOP to protect us being the county, the citizens, the individual, then my thought is these immediate detentions, the probable cause should be made by the juvenile judge or magistrates, not the judicial commissioner. Now, every case is going to have probable cause determination on it because there's some allegation of a violation if you look at the code section. And, you know, optimally, it would be somebody law trained that make that determination. But Tennessee is a myriad of different ways they approach this. If you go to Van Buren County and they just have a general sessions judge, that's the guy or gal who gets up in the middle of the night and makes that determination. But in Metro, they may have a battalion of attorneys that do that. Here, we're sort of a mix with the commissioner. So it's very important, in my mind, for the SOP to reflect accurately how we want this done. And we make that determination. Right. Not the commission, not the county attorney. We've got that responsibility. So I think that we'd benefit from a retreat dealing only with this SOP issue.
By retreat, what do you all?
Well,
what is in your mind?
point of order. Hold on a second. We have jumped 5 items on the agenda. The retreat is item number 9. We're at item number 3. And I would like to stay on item 3 till we properly dispose of it or move on from it in some manner. So if Mr. McDonald has made the recommendation and/or suggestion that we table or defer discussion of the SOP until such times the board members can just look at it more thoroughly. And I approve of that suggestion with the provision that the SOP is probably going to be something it's going to be constantly evaluated. So it's not something that would come to a more permanent conclusion, but that as we get into this, for every answer probably we come up with, we probably raise 2 or 3 more questions. And so if you're suggesting that we need to be deliberate and disciplined, but also expeditious in our approach, I couldn't agree more. So to the extent that we can begin the process evaluating the SOP so this commission can make a determination of what that looks like, and this is the beginning of that process, the chair is in complete agreement. But again, the chair cannot make a motion or a second. But I want to make sure we dispose of the agenda in an orderly manner, which is Ms. Maxwell, which is the point of my statement.
I got you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question.
Please.
About the SOP. There are appendices.
I'm sorry?
There are appendices
Yes, ma'am.
attached. Have those been updated? Do we know?
Ms. Duke?
They weren't included in Mr. Christensen's
I have not
draft.
reviewed those. I just reviewed the SOP and made legal changes as to legal form on them, but I have not reviewed the appendices. Ms. Duke might be able to speak to that.
I forwarded those to him to take a look at, and because it wasn't addressed in the red line, I assumed that it was fine.
2 of the appendices are state statutes, and I believe the versions that are included are out of date. So if you would please update those. Title
Can you-
37-1-114.
Thank you.
And 37-1-116, I believe. Both of those statutes have been amended since these drafts were put in your.
Ms. Cole, I interrupted you. Could you state those statutes again, please? My apologies.
Yes, it's Title 37-1-114 and Title 37-1-116.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we defer action on SOP today, but only for purposes, the limited purposes of addressing the SOP at our very first retreat, and that the minutes reflect that this board is given this optimal priority in an effort to comply with any provisions laid out in the consent decree as Daniel just referenced. So that's my motion, but I also would like to say something else related to this, and then I'm not going to speak again on this issue. This may be more semantics, but perception, and it becomes reality in things. I know we use the term redlining. Redlining has a completely different meaning in many communities. It relates to how loans are offered and presented to communities as it relates to insurance. I'd like to offer the term green lighting because we're trying to get the green light to get things done. So if we're going to use.
Okay, point of order again. We have digressed from your motion, so we can come back to that, Mr. McDonald, if we may. My apologies, but you have a motion on the floor with regard to the SOP policy discussion. And basically, to summarize your motion, it's an ongoing matter
Right.
that in part may be addressed by the potential of a retreat. Is that correct?
Right, and if we do vote to have a retreat, that the SOP is given top priority,
Understood.
okay?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Now, let's go to, we're going to skip to item 9, which is the retreat. And that's the privilege of the chair, I might add. So since the retreat's been brought up, Mr. McDonald, if that's not too far out of order, why don't we discuss your idea for a retreat?
I feel like we're playing Let's Make a Deal, door one.
No,
two,
we're not
or
playing make a deal. I'm just trying to be accommodating because I've called you out and I don't mean to do that. I'm trying to keep us to the agenda.
Right, I'm just trying to lighten the mood.
Good
because
deal.
What we're doing here.
We're fine.
is-
We're excellent.
Is very serious.
It is, but we're in good shape.
Again, I think we need, time is of the essence on a lot of these issues. We've already talked about SOP. So my motion, I'll keep it simple, is that we move to have a retreat. And hopefully that could be done January 2023, or at least in the spring, early as we can in the spring. I know 2022 is pretty much exhausted, so that's my motion.
We have a motion on the floor, and if we're going to get
Just a brief discussion before we.
we can, or we can have discussion after the second, but we'll discuss certainly before a vote. So
Well,
we can
but-
second now or later.
Okay, I'm good either way, just want to discuss.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now for purposes of discussion, before you get started, Ms. Maxwell, I'd like to ask Nick to comment on the sunshine law and public disclosure as it relates to a retreat of that were being discussed here.
Sure. As far as I know, there's no board or committee of the county that has done a retreat. So this would, now I've not been doing this, I said of the county, board or committee of,
School
yes
board.
ma'am?
Rutherford County
board
School
does.
I
Board.
said Rutherford County government.
Oh,
So
government, okay.
School board is different. But anyway, so
School
with
board
that
is not
being
part of
said,
government.
you have to consider how it's gonna be paid for. So probably you'd have to go make a request either through steering or through budget to get payment for any sort of retreat that would be taking place, I would think, because there's not authority in your private act to expend other sort of money for that sort of thing. And then two, if it's something that the board is, yes, sir? Sorry, you had a question?
Oh, no,
Oh, okay.
no. Sorry, yeah.
It's okay. If there is a retreat that is gonna be budgeted for and paid for, then you have to give public notice of it, and you have to give notice of where it's gonna be taking place. I'd also recommend that you have somebody there to take minutes of whatever is going on, because it's a public meeting between a body such as yourself. So those are some things to consider.
Okay.
Could I?
Please.
Okay, I have been a part of 2 retreats as a school board, and one of them we didn't even leave town. And I don't believe it was expensive at all. We just spent a Saturday morning of quality time with our fellow board members, and we hashed out whatever we needed to hash out. And that didn't cost anybody anything.
Sure, you could do that.
And,
So you could set a board, you could set a meeting at this place or some other place for an 8-hour meeting, publicly notice it. No money's expended, everybody just show up and have a long discussion. That's perfectly.
Can
okay.
we, I know we couldn't have our meetings, our regular meetings at the courthouse, but could we not just use the courthouse?
Yes.
The answer is if use 205 would be more than accommodating in that regard per the schedule. And so if we're looking at using the courthouse facilities for a retreat, for an all-day or a half-day session or whatever, then it would be up to the committee to make that determination. That certainly helps the office of the mayor out tremendously, given my work schedule.
I would prefer.
I've got some significant challenges in siphoning off a weekend or even one day all at one time.
I would prefer something if we stayed in town, at the courthouse or wherever everybody else agrees to. I think it's the most cost-effective way for us to do what we need to do and have a retreat, and it's not gonna cost the taxpayers.
That's correct.
We could even do it right here.
Potentially. Ms. Duke?
This part of the facility is rarely used.
Okay,
so-
good.
Okay.
Excellent. So there's a potential to have it here, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I'd also like to offer possibility of using one of the community centers, because that would give us 2 different levels. We would opt for the board to retreat. It also would give the community opportunity to, if they want to, because it's open, to attend the meetings. And I'm not saying people will not come here, but I think we need to send this message where we're prepared to go where the people are.
Well, I think, and I agree, and I think the courthouse in room 205 certainly provides a venue that would accommodate that request in some respects, so. But that's, again, this is up for the committee to make that decision. But I will say this, Mr. McDonald, you're correct that 2022 is like, it's
Yeah.
very, very difficult. And I would, as a personal request of the chair, I would request that we do this, if we're going to do this in the first of the year, we do it before April, preferably before March, because I've got budget and that is extremely time consuming. So, I mean, there are just so many hours in a week that I'm going to have available once we get to the fourth quarter of our fiscal year. But that's only one request.
Is it possible to make our regular February meeting the retreat?
I would suggest against that. I think with retreat, we need to be focused on what we're retreating to
Okay.
do.
I would agree with Judge Daniel on that. If our focus is gonna be on the SOP, then, because that's such a heavy lift.
Right.
I would agree with Judge Daniel on that regard. So, anyway.
Well, we do have a couple of months. I do think we could probably look and find a date in January to have this, because I think first of the year would be the best.
I agree. Or early February.
Oh,
Ms.
yeah,
Cullo,
exactly.
you have any?
That's fine.
Okay. So I tell you what, do we have, then we can make, why don't we, as a suggestion, I'll look at this calendar for 205 for January and February. You can, Mr. McDonald, if you want to look at the calendar for maybe community centers that we have, we can bring several options back
Okay.
to the December meeting. And unless there's any objection, we can make it a decision in December about a date and a time and the time we want to allocate for this.
That's fine.
Okay? Is that satisfactory?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yes.
I don't think that's, yes, Mr. Christian?
May I just chime in real quick?
Please, please.
Knowing that it's going to be a number of months before the board has officially signed off on an SOP, because that's the whole intent of having a workshop retreat, whatever you want to call it. There were legal changes made of my review of the thing that was sent out, and I just don't know if it's okay with the board for giving Ms. Duke some direction here. If she can utilize that SOP that had the recommended legal changes just going forward until such time as the board can officially making a sort of further amendments they want from a substantive policy change on it. That's just a suggestion, but I think you should maybe do that.
Nick, are you saying that the board should, at least on a temporary basis, adopt the changes you've recommended until such times we have an opportunity to review the SOP and make changes?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I would disagree with that. I'd like to see them printed out where I can lay one against the other and just proceed. Because what I saw up to this point was a lot of grammatical changes, and that may change the meaning, but I don't want to prove anything until I understand it. Does that make sense?
It does. I don't know how we move forward, though.
We got one. We got whatever's been presented to us.
I think that's what Nick was saying, unless I misunderstood. Did I misunderstand Nick?
Well, I know that at the last board meeting, there was an SOP distributed.
Correct.
I had not reviewed that at that point. I have reviewed it, and I made certain changes to it from as to legal form. And if there's any, and that's what was sent out last week by Ms. Duke. And so that's my only suggestion, was utilizing that on a temporary basis as I've looked at it, at least this first go around, and getting that in place until, the next 4 or 5 months before you all have made any other substantive changes, because there might be actual substantive changes that you would like made. A lot of those SOPs are predicated upon TCI minimum standards. And so a lot of my review is simply comparing those minimum standard regulations to what was currently in there, and there were some tweaks that needed to be made, nothing major, but just some things. There's also, one thing to note is there's gonna be updates to those minimum standards coming in the next few months from the state. And so there's probably gonna be some necessary changes that this board will wanna make to conform with the new regulations. However, those are not in effect yet.
So we have the current SOP, or if we're going to approve on a temporary basis those changes recommended by Nick, we need that in a form of a motion in a second. Or otherwise, we will adhere to what has been currently adopted.
I'd move that we seek to have a retreat for January, February 2023. And if that requires additional funding, that we we ask the staff or whomever to pursue those dollars. That's like I said, that's the issue on the table. So I would ask that I move that we do that.
And that's your motion?
Yes.
Second.
So, for point of clarity, the motion is to have a retreat in January or February,
Right.
and then at our December meeting, we will more exactly determine the date and the
Yes.
location. Is that the motion?
Yes, and also include that motion is to ask or direct the staff to try to secure funding. We may not know that until December based on the location or whatever.
Well, that will have to be, that's correct, because that is something that's going to have to go before the Budget
Right.
Committee
Yeah.
and the
Right.
Commission, and
Right.
that may not be enough time if you're looking at additional funding, just as a pragmatic issue.
Right, again, I was going, my statement is based on what our county attorney indicated, that there may not be money in our operating budget. And so,
Well, I can tell you it wasn't budgeted for. That I can tell you.
The only thing it's budgeted for is the per meeting payment.
That's correct.
Right.
For the once a month.
That's good, for the board. Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I think I seconded it.
Oh, okay. Okay, my apologies.
That's okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ayes have it.
I abstained.
I abstain. All right, item number 4, open positions.
Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we move on, just thinking forward, if it is going to be my responsibility to start that process of public safety, budget, finance, full commission regarding the funding or potential funding, as minor as it may be, if we don't begin that and we don't have details until December, that goes to public safety in December, the 2 meetings in January, so y'all should be looking at meetings in February, meeting times in February.
Ms. Duke, it's pretty clear to the chair that the time constraints of the motion did not allow for the funding mechanism to be appropriated in a timely fashion.
Okay.
I thought I made that clear.
Okay, I'm back.
So I'm not sure how we reconcile a January, February meeting and the time constraints the commission has to approve for the funding of the additional resources that might be required.
Okay.
So the Office of the Mayor will diligently work on that. I don't know how to answer that other than the way I just stated it.
That's fine, I'm good with that.
It may not be funded, but to be clear, whether we have a funding mechanism for additional staff or not does not preclude the retreat, okay? One is, it doesn't preclude the other, okay? I want to make that very clear. I'll have an answer for us in December.
Okay.
Number 4, open positions. Ms. Duke?
Quickly, there is one current part-time educational assistant position open, and we have 2 full-time male detention officer positions open. And that's that of that.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we will accept that report without dissent. Item number 5, modification of IGS with the United States Marshal Service.
All right.
Ms. Duke?
We had a visit from the U.S. Marshal Service maybe a week, 10 days ago. They brought a modification agreement with them. There are a couple of items in this new modification that go against our current policies. I brought those up to the marshals. I believe, and I'm hoping that I marked them on y'all's copies, but on page 3 of 5, number 5 says the U.S. Marshal Service will not reimburse the detention facility for medical payments made on behalf of USMS prisoners in the absence of a specific arrangement approved in writing by USMS. The marshal that was present explained that yes, if we, are involved in this and we're obviously going to pay you. And I said, but that's not exactly how it reads, and I'm not currently comfortable with that. So he's going to take the next couple of things that I'm talking about back to his command and see if they are interested in changing them. And I told him that I would be discussing these few items with the board and would see how y'all felt about it as well. On number 6, the short version of number 6 is that they are expecting all federal prisoners to be tested for TB, and that's not something that current minimum standards require us to do. It's not something that is impossible, but we currently don't do it. So I did mention that to him, and I told him I would also bring that up to the board as well.
A point on that, currently the Rutherford County Workhouse does test for TB, don't they, Ms. Duke?
I'm not sure if they do or not. They generally have longer lengths
Sure.
of stay, so
Absolutely.
potentially.
Okay.
On page 4 of 5, each of these bullet points are basically the same. The issue that I take with those is the mention of the waist chain. We don't currently use a waist chain or a belly chain in the manner in which they're describing, so we would not want to or feel comfortable using those waist chains with U.S. Marshal detainees. I let him know that. He would say that he would also take that up the chain to make sure that, or to inquire if they would feel comfortable removing that. So long of the short is there were a few things that I didn't feel comfortable with. He called me this morning. He knew we were having our board meeting today. Said that he's still waiting to hear from his upper management. We don't have to accept anyone from any agency or any county if we don't want to. Simply having an agreement doesn't require us to make those kinds of decisions.
It's not obligatory in any way?
It's not obligatory, so we can just wait as long as they would like to, unless the board has comments about it, until they either change this language to something that's more appropriate or move along.
What would be your recommendation in regards to this attachment?
I'm not comfortable with the wording. It's easy for players to say, well, that's not exactly what it means, and we don't care about that, and you can do it however, but I'm not comfortable with that. So unless they change the wording, I don't suspect we'll be, unless directed otherwise, interested in holding Marshal Service detainees.
I would move that we not accept the modification with the language that had been identified by Ms. Duke unless it's corrected by the requester.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 6, there's a news article requested for discussion. I'm not sure what news
So,
article we're talking about.
Mr. McDonald had asked that I send a copy of this particular news article to everyone via email, and I did so, and I also made copies for everybody today, and it was something that he wanted to discuss, and so we added it to the agenda.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, you're recognized.
I'll keep this brief. I think this can be something we can discuss at our future retreat. But as a footnote, one of the issues that's addressed in this report relates to mental health, behavioral health issues for juveniles in the state of Tennessee. And again, this may be an item that we have to table for the retreat, but as we move forward, looking at the budget for FY '23, maybe FY '24, I would like for the board to consider the employment of a grants person to write grants for the facility. There are literally hundreds and thousands of dollars at the public sector, private sector, federal government level. And it would be nice to be able to try to capture some of those dollars as it relates.
Point of clarification, are you asking for somebody to write grants or
Right,
to?
I'm gonna clarify that in my presentation here. The purpose of the position would be to have someone who can search for grants, write the grants, and then administer them. And my understanding is that there may be a need for someone to provide oversight to make sure that those grants are being administered properly. In addition to that responsibility under that position, the individual would also have the responsibility of doing statistical analysis for this board, because one of the issues that's raised in this report is some of the walls, firewalls that exist improperly so as relates to information about juveniles, protecting their privacy. And so it would be great to have someone who could do the statistical data and maybe figure out some ways to respect that firewall related to privacy, but at the same time help us generate data that relates to Rutherford County. The third part of that position, and again, it goes back to this report, would be able to have someone who could do community outreach, working with different social services agencies in Rutherford County. And then the fourth component would be, for this position, someone who could act as a liaison between the Department of Children's Services and any other agencies at the state and federal level. The reason why I mentioned that last part is that during my interview for this position, I indicated to the steering committee my interest in making sure that we're able to keep an eye on what the federal government is doing, what the state government is doing, and what's happening across the other 95 counties. So this is in response to part of my presentation of what I told them I would like to pursue. And like I said, this is something that probably would have to be added to the retreat, but I would like to see the staff look at putting together, maybe work with HR, a position that covers those four components. So that was my reason for wanting this report included in, or for our agenda today. So the motion is to ask the staff to try to put together a job description that addresses those four components. That's my motion.
Discussion?
I think you'll be pleased to hear that there is currently in the works a new computer system that's going to be used by the juvenile court clerk, the youth services office, as well as our department, that actually interfaces, as I understand it, with multiple counties across the state, where we can access even some of their data that is shareable, and that it's my understanding that this software program has little, if no, cost associated with it. So the statistics piece may well be handled by this program that they're beginning to get started discussing.
Within the finance department, there is a full-time administrator of grants for Rutherford County, and that person's responsibility is exactly what you've outlined, Mr. McDonald. Their purpose is to search out both federal and state grants wherein there are monies available to Rutherford County across all disciplines for just that purpose that you outlined. So all we need to do at this point is for that individual within the finance department instruction saying, we want you now to begin searching for any federal or state grants that may be available to Rutherford County to assist the Juvenile Detention Center and your ongoing request for additional funding, regardless of what it may entail. But we have that ability currently, and all they have to do is receive that instruction to go look for those grants if they're available.
Well, my concern is that's just one component of this position. If I may finish, please.
Please.
This is just one component of this position. And the last meeting, something was said, and it could not have been more on point. There are eyes watching what we do. The whole world, in some respects, are watching what happens with this board. And my concern is that while that may in fact be the case, that person has responsibility of seeking grants for not just one department or agency or board or commission, but the entire government. And I would like for us to show or demonstrate that no, this is a priority. We need to have someone whose only responsibility is to pursue dollars for these young people, protect their mental health, protect them as it relates to anything in terms of their medical, just regular optimal health. And so that's why I am adamant about wanting to see this board demonstrate that we have to separate ourselves out to some degree from the rest of the government. This agency has been sued, and we keep talking about we don't want to talk about it. That's fine. Well, let's demonstrate that we're trying to move forward. And I'm looking at you eye to eye because I want to say this on record. I have confidence in the fact that you can pursue and do these things. And this is just one component of this job description. It's one component. We need to have a liaison with the government, other governments. We need to have a liaison and community person who can become the face of this board and the center. And so, again, that's my motion. Of course, I defer to the majority of how the board feels about this, but I just simply want to go on record as being very passionate about the fact that we cannot be business as usual. If there has been a grants person working for the government to do this, then we can also pursue that avenue. That just gives us a second avenue to seek dollars. But this is not the only responsibility that this person would have.
We have a motion on the floor. The motion fails for lack of a second. Let me say, with regard to Mr. McDonald's request, that the office of the mayor will instruct the finance department and the grant, the individual in charge. There are two individuals that pursue grants on behalf of the county, and that I will instruct the finance department to pursue with all due haste any grants that are available to Rutherford County, especially with regard to juvenile detention, and so that their funding may be available that we have not heretofore been pursuing, and we will absolutely do that. I do agree. I would like for us to pursue that end before we undertake adding a staff position, but that doesn't mean we can't address this at a later date, once again. But let's find out if grants are available, and if there's so many grants or there's so much grant work that we need to add additional staff, the chair is certainly in favor of making sure those resources become available. Item number 7, name change requested for discussion. Mr. McDonald, I believe this is yours as well, is it not?
Yeah, this is my last one for today. I asked the chair prior to the meeting if we could have just 1 minute of silence before I made my presentation. Does anyone have an objection to that?
Without objection.
Thank you. William Faulkner, who was one of the great Southern writers, said that history is not dead. Said it's not even past. What it meant was part of our future and present is based upon our past and how we build upon that. In Rutherford County, we have managed to bridge tradition with tomorrow, which I think is a beautiful thing for government. Part of that relates to branding. It relates to how a government, how a corporation or agency wants to be perceived by their stakeholders. So much of what we do in government relates to expectations. And that expectation, I believe, is based upon the visuals and what people see and what we do. People don't respond to what we say. They look at our actions. One of the things that I would like for the board to consider, but I did want us to go on record with this today, and it may take some action, and I know it will take some action from higher authority, is to consider the renaming, rebranding of this facility. Right now, it's the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center. My proposal and suggestion would be that it be renamed the Rutherford County Juvenile Justice Administration Building, or Rutherford County Juvenile Justice Administration Center. And in the process of adopting that new name, we create a new imagery. And this next statement is not a reflection on anyone, it's who we are. I know we have a lot of images that relate to individuals being captured. We use handcuffs and the like to reflect who we are. I'd like for us to adopt and consider the adoption of scales of justice and the gavel. They both reflect the two-part responsibilities of what happens under this facility. Those are only two things that I wanted to say, and I realize that a name change would be something that would have to be approved by the county commission, maybe even the state building commission, building authority. But I do believe that we should consider that new name, which reflects that we are here to provide justice. That's it.
Any discussion?
Just to clarify, for this section of this building or the entire building that encompasses those other departments as well?
Well, that would be one of the issues that would have to be fleshed out.
Okay.
And I think it clearly it relates and is focused upon our purview as a center.
Judge Lampley?
So this building, while it's one roof, is really two different facilities. There's courtside services, there's the front of the house, I'll say, and back of the house is the detention center.
Right.
And the entrance you come in here says Juvenile Court Detention Center. The front of house, it's not called the detention center. And we commonly call it juvenile court in speaking, but it's the Rutherford County Juvenile Services Center.
Thank you for that thank you for that very important clarification. And to be clear, your discussion is not in the form of a motion, but in form of discussion, or is that in the form of a motion? The chair's unsure.
Well, I think the motion is for us to put this on our agenda for discussion at our retreat. That way I'm not asking for deliberation on it today. So the motion is to ask that this issue be placed on the agenda for one of our future retreats.
Retreat or retreats? I heard plural. Are we talking more than one now, Mr. McDonald?
I'm not.
Is that a bait and switch?
No, I'm not Nostradamus, so I can tell you that I'm not Nostradamus. I'm simply saying that there may be a need for more than one.
Well, I'm paying very close attention.
Yes, you are. This is my pity. But no, I say it should be single, or it should just be a one retreat.
I understand.
Okay.
Again, we are trying, while the matters before us are very serious, we're not
Right.
taking ourselves too seriously, okay?
Exactly.
So we have a motion to consider the renaming of the facility at the potential retreat the first of the year. Do we have a?
I think the point is the facility encompasses the whole thing, and Judge Lampley is accurate. I would think we need to limit this to this portion of the
Right. Which is-
building.
Right, which is what I think Judge Daniel, I think I tried to clarify that in terms of the purview of focus. Yeah.
I will second Mr. McDonald's motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. The chair votes no. All right. Item number 8, ManMaker Academy. I think that is you, Ms.
That is
Maxwell.
me, on the heels of what Mr. McDonald said. And this may not be something that's appropriate, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart because it is in our Rutherford County school system. Right, I believe it's being adopted by all the schools. Up until now, it's been one of those that's been like, this coach will recommend these number of boys, and a teacher would recommend, and that's how they've done it. But it's Mr. Chris Johnson started this. He's the greatness coach, and his son, they all went through Riverdale, but he has gotten a really good program together here, and he made this proposal. And I told him, I said, I'm just one person, and I will bring it to you because I really feel like this is something that can impact and can just be another tool in the toolbox to help with the youth and help them change their lives, turn their lives around, so make sure that we don't see them and they don't get caught up in the juvenile justice as adults and keep and reoffend. And so this is a program that he has. It's over 8 weeks. It does cost, but I think the costs are minimal compared to what benefits are. It's over 8 weeks. It's a 2-hour. They meet on Monday nights currently, and they mentor the children. They set the children, each of the individuals, up with a community, someone in the community that basically becomes that father figure, that person that they haven't, that's been lacking in the home. Because a lot of these kids, especially the kids I used to work with at Riverdale, don't have a dad or don't have a father figure in the home, someone to look up to and kind of keep them on the straight and narrow. And just, it's a very good course. It does cost, and but when they cross over at the end of the 8 weeks, they receive a suit, and they receive so much more. They have their self-esteem. They have really got the tools to go forward and become the good citizens that they need to be. And I brought this to you all. Y'all can look at it, and we can discuss it at the retreat or not. I don't. It's up to you all. But I just really think it's a really good program, and I appreciate Mr. Johnson putting this proposal together for me to hand out to you all. And he is willing to come and meet with us at a later date if you'd like to, and he can answer questions better than I could.
How would it work? I mean, how would it work for youth that are here?
That's what we have to figure out. I don't know. Right now, he meets on Monday nights at, I believe they've met at a church. I think they've met at one of the schools. And
Has he worked with incarcerated young men before, who are currently incarcerated?
I think he's met with children who have been inside the system, but they're currently out on probation, what have you. I
Right.
do not know if he's worked on those incarcerated currently. This would be maybe a first, but it's a chance that a lot of these men might want to take. Yeah.
You'll be pleased to know that our current chaplain, Michael Davis, is very familiar
Oh, is
with this
he?
program.
I was hoping so.
We're going to talk about in a little bit, and would love to have him come to whatever meeting or whenever you would like to talk to him. I think that the kids are currently being offered something very similar to
Okay.
that. There's no suit at the end, but Chaplain Mike loves these kids, and they love him, and he teams up with one of our other educational specialists, and they do very, very similar topics, weekly sessions. So I would love, once we hash through some of the important things that we need to do, for y'all to be able to hear these two gentlemen speak about some of the topics that we've got.
That would be great. I'm just, like I said, I knew this gentleman. He had come and spoke to me. He wanted to make sure that they got inside the Rutherford County educational system, and we're not just a few guys here and a few guys here. I wanted them the opportunity to several more youth at all of our schools to be able to grasp this. And so I just thought, after reading the article, really ironic that Mr. McDonald forwarded an article that I had also seen and was very troubling, not surprising, but very troubling. I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. So I appreciate you letting me know, Lynn Duke, that they've already kind of started something kind of like that. But I would love to see Mr. Johnson come and speak as well.
Yes, and they love guest speakers. We encourage and have lots of guys signed up to come, but there's always room for more.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Ms. Maxwell, is there an action you would like to propose here? Would you like to defer?
Let's defer this for right now.
Okay.
And everyone's got the materials.
Yeah.
They can look them over. I
Okay.
just wanted you all to be aware that this
Thank
is
you.
out there.
Thank you very much. Item number 10, opportunity for public comment.
so this was a suggestion to be placed on the agenda by Judge Daniel, and so I did so.
Yeah, I was wondering if there would be an invitation to any person who is here from the public that wants to address us. That's my question.
I don't, Nick, I'm back to you again. Is there opportunity, is there anything that precludes this body from hearing public comments from the public, similar to what the county commission does with, let's say, a 3-minute time frame or
Yeah,
whatever, something
sure.
like that? Is there anything that precludes this body from doing that?
No, sir. So if the board is wanting to set an internal policy, then probably what is appropriate is a motion to be made to allow for it to start, if that's when the board wants it.
Sure.
At the start of each meeting, the very first item on the agenda after the quorum's determined and the minutes are approved would be to allow for public comment period. How the county commission does it, they require you to sign up.
Correct.
Beforehand, it doesn't necessarily have, you don't have to do that, there's no requirement for that, and it is okay for you to set reasonable time limitations. The county commission generally allows for 3 minutes per person.
One comment, if I may. I know that the nights that the county commission does that, the county commission meetings are extraordinarily lengthy. And, there are only so many hours in the day. That is not an argument for or against the idea. It's just something that this committee may want to consider before moving forward.
Well, the idea, my perception is that one of the things we're trying to create is transparency
Correct.
with the community. And only opportunity they would have for that to present something to me is to come up here and make such a comment. So I would move that we have a public comment opportunity, limited at 3 minutes a person, with a total period of time capped 30 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever. So then they have some opportunity to present their concerns or positions.
Can we cap that, Nick?
The school board does.
Yeah, it's a sticky wicket, so what I would suggest is if you want to put that into your motion, I think that's fine. However, if there comes a point in time where there is a very important matter, not saying that all matters are not important, but where you obviously have many, many people interested and who all are making different comments, that in order to assure that everybody is treated fairly, that if it goes over that 30 minutes, then there likely should be a motion made to suspend that rule and allow for a further discussion to be had, so you're ensuring that everybody has a fair opportunity to be heard. Because by having a public comment period, you're opening up the floor as a public forum, and when you've done that, now that there's some certain First Amendment protections that might or might not attach, so.
Where they could suspend it, come back to the next meeting, so
That's correct.
yep, that's fine with me.
So formalize your motion, if you would, please, Judge Daniel.
I move that we have a public comment opportunity limited to 3 minutes per participant at the beginning of the meeting, not to exceed 30 minutes. If it exceeds that, I'm talking 30 minutes total.
Correct.
For the participants, then they be invited to come back at the next meeting for the balance of their presentation.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
Is this something that we would need to coordinate if there is a lot of interest where they sign up earlier with the sheriff's department to come and stand by if necessary?
That would not be a bad idea.
Okay.
Well, we've got what's referred to as unintended consequences.
Yeah. Nobody wants anything to happen, but as someone who's been in the meeting that got a lot of attention, it's nice to know that there's somebody there in case somebody loses their cool.
Ms. Duke, if the chair could so inquire, could you reach out to the sheriff's department and find out how this committee's expectations could be managed with regard to, if we do, since we're going to open it up to public discussion, having a sheriff's deputies here, what does that look like? And is there a budgetary cost associated with that? And would you report back to us at the next meeting, please, ma'am?
Absolutely.
Is there any objections from the committee in that regard? Okay, without objection. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Item number 11, I think we want to discuss the idea of having an executive meeting. For purposes of discussion, an executive meeting is where the county's attorney meets privately with the committee, and the room is effectively empty because he's providing legal counsel to a governing entity. Am I saying that right, Nick?
You are, with the additional caveat that you can only use these for pending or threatened litigation.
Thank you.
So there has to be a pending court case that we're talking about or threatened litigation that we're talking about in order to invoke it.
Aside from that, you can't invoke executive.
That's correct.
Thank you.
This is something I brought up, and it's probably not appropriate in the context of, I know for myself, I've been in government in the past. I really didn't have to worry about public meetings because I decided I was the sole person as a judge. But for all of us who are unfamiliar with this situation, I think that we are now scared to even talk to each other on the telephone or even say howdy doody at a reception. So maybe some discussion, maybe from government services about how this works as like a seminar so that we know better about how to operate might be helpful, but I leave it to our members to decide how they would like to pursue that.
Well, we have several of these over the course of a year with the school board, and that's just us.
You have several what?
I'm sorry, executive meetings
With your attorney?
with our attorney, yes.
And
Because there's a lot of information regarding juveniles that we're not at liberty to discuss. And we have pending litigations against us, and we're not allowed to discuss that in public in an open forum. So we will have these executive meetings with just the attorney and just our other counsel and the board.
I can say for the practical application of something like this on the county commission is that the commission and the county attorney almost always know in advance when we're going to go into executive session because of the nature of pending litigation or ongoing litigation.
Right.
And so if, to the extent that the center would find itself in that situation again, God forbid, then I think, of course, it would be appropriate for us to go into executive session. But barring that, I'm not sure if it's,
Well, maybe we all ought to need to go to a seminar on the open meeting law.
I think that would be a great idea as soon as I can find time.
Anyway, they may be
You guys are
available.
filling up my
I'm
wagon.
hoping we don't have to do it either.
There is.
Yes, sir.
There are some very useful materials that I'm happy to distribute to everyone that gives an overview of the open meetings law and how that works. So the general rule of thumb is an off-chance meeting by two of you in a public setting or whatever, that's fine. You can be talking about personal stuff and family stuff. Where we get into the grayer areas and the no-no areas is when we start deliberating towards a decision that could come before this board. So if Ms. Cullum saw Mr. McDaniel at the gas station.
McDonald.
McDonald at the gas station, and they wanted to have a discussion, began having a discussion about what we should do to amend the SOP with respect to a fact finder of probable cause, and they like Judge Daniel's recommendation to that effect, well, that's deliberating, because we know that that's going to come up for some sort of open discussion and vote. So that's what we cannot do. And I can guarantee you that commissioners, I'm not going to say they struggle with it, but it's something that they always question of whether and to what extent they can talk about board business when they're not in a public setting. And I guess you just have to err on the side of caution. And the idea is that we're not influencing other people's votes outside of a public setting. But I'm happy to email you out some materials that I've collected. There's actually a very good succinct thing that an entity called CTAS that is done that has a few pages. It's not very long. I'm happy to send that out to you. And if you have any other questions, you guys, you can always just call my
I've
office,
seen that, and that's very good.
So, yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have to call me.
How about sending that out then?
It is good.
Yeah.
And I might add, as an aside, the Tennessee General Assembly, in their infinite wisdom, when they passed this statute, exempt themselves from the same
Did they?
law that, yes, they did. So they can do this all day
I've
long.
already sent it out. Mayor, two more things.
Please.
It looks like I have already sent it out. Ms. Cullum has pointed out, there must be an email.
Oh,
So
yes, that's it
Judge
exactly.
Daniel, if you
Okay.
can get that, shoot me an email, I'll send it right back to you.
I'll do
And
that.
then also, Commissioner sitting next to me suggested I mention this because it is true. So for example, when you guys did did you do a facility tour as a group? So there's exceptions to this. If you're going in to a meeting together to learn something or to do a property view, sometimes the school buys real
When did
estate
it
or
come?
whatever, you're going to look and learn and gather information and data, but you're not actually deliberating about certain items. You can do that. And you can talk, you can ask questions, well, what about this facility, or what about that vendor, or whatever, if we're just gathering information, not deliberating.
They come in recently. When did you send that out? And I may have missed it.
I'm not sure, Judge Daniel, it was maybe a month
Before the
ago,
first
before the first meeting.
Okay, I'll go back and look.
Okay.
Judge,
Yes,
we
sir.
didn't have your correct email for,
Oh, that's
for
right.
a minute.
That's where, okay, I'm happy to
Send
send it
it
to you when I
again.
get back to the office, yes, sir.
Okay.
If there's no further discussion and no action on item 11, we'll move to item 12, quarterly report.
Yeah, that's something I brought up too.
Yes, sir.
Section 11 of the statute that created this board says that we're to be, somebody's to provide a quarterly report of all detention center operations. I assume that's to the commission, or who is that to? And is that done, or?
Well, when I saw that, I went back and took a look. I report monthly with that kind of information to to public safety. So I don't know if, my follow-up questions were gonna be, if you want something specific and quarterly, I just need to know what you would like.
No, all I was trying to do is comply with the statute.
Okay.
It's specifically quarterly reports, yes. And, this is the other part of it. I appreciate you handing this to me. The statute also provides, it says, provide the board with quarterly reports of all detention center operations, including, but not limited to, the amount of the work done and its estimated value. Now, that sounds like something that the workhouse would do for detainees who are out working on the road and doing that kind of thing. Is this some just glitch in the statute, or what is your understanding of that?
I suspect that this was mirrored after a correctional work board's.
But you don't measure the value of
No, we don't.
services of any of the
No.
residents. That wouldn't.
They
be-
don't do work.
That's right. That's my understanding too. So that must be just a glitch. I see. But now back to the quarterly reports. To comply with the statute, what would the quarterly reports be?
Well, I was going to look to you to see if there is specific items that you would be interested in, and this creates something to your liking.
Okay, I don't know if that's what was intended by the statute. But, for example, what I would be interested in knowing is things that I've asked you before is, how many residents do we have? What are they here for? How many are from in county? How many are from out of county? How many have had a detention hearing? How many have not had one? Those are things would be.
So,
But I think you're making some kind of report as part of this lawsuit, aren't you?
those reports that go to the Public Safety Committee are also viewed by the attorneys that were involved in that, and they've seen fit to decide that that was appropriate for them. So they've just piggybacked on what she's already turning in, basically works for us. Now, I can bring that monthly or quarterly, or I can do something different if you would like. I mean, I'm just, whatever suits.
Well, I'm not trying to create work for you. I assume that if that report is good for what you're doing now, if you just put it in a quarterly report, then it'd look like we'd be complying.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes.
I would like to see more information on the reports about the basic education programs. There are a lot of details about church attended, programming, meals served, but I can't tell what amount of schooling is being done.
One of the things that we will talk about before the end of the meeting may be helpful and may answer those questions. And I don't know if all you have is that first chart, if you have the entire packet, because I also am turning in multiple details about classes and things like that.
And these detail beautifully the life skills, but I don't see any details about basic education.
Okay, well, let's see if what we have scheduled a little farther down the agenda is helpful with explanation, or if we need to truly do something more. Because we can add to those items that we do monthly, we just can't take away.
Further discussion? Seeing none, if there is no motion, we will move to item 13, other business, and I believe this is you, isn't it, Ms.
It
Duke?
is.
Item A, Meal service nutrition information.
So some of the questions that were asked at the first meeting, I tried to write down and bring back to you with a little more information. One of the things that was discussed and there was questions about is nutritional information, what they're eating, how many calories, is there a dietitian involved? So what I have provided in item 13A is the 4-week rotating schedule, the compliance statement from the food service company that the county is contracting with, as well as the specific dietitian's commission card. And hopefully that will answer some of those questions.
Any questions or responses to Ms. Duke with regard to meal service nutritional information, item A? We can, when you take these packets home, if you have questions that arise, we most certainly can put these back on the agenda for the next meeting. That doesn't preclude us doing that. So I want the board members to realize that we can address these items more than once at multiple meetings. If there are no objections, we'll move to item B, contract agencies. Ms. Duke.
Again, one of the questions that was asked was regarding the counties that we contract with, as well as any agencies. And then I believe there was a question as to what other counties had detention centers and how many beds they may have. So before you have the list of, we're going to call it 41 and a half counties that we contract with.
Excuse me?
So Williams.
I'm paying attention again, just like Mr. McDonald wanted to use the plural for retreats. I noticed 41 and a half.
Right. So Williamson County is a special situation. They have their own juvenile detention center, obviously, as do we. We have a contract with each other that in the event that they have someone who they, for whatever reason, do not feel comfortable detaining, that we would accept that child and vice versa. So as an example, if they have had a facility escape or a severe attack on staff, or if there is a litigation issue that they need to.
Something that would be unique to that facility that would require removal of that individual.
But not necessarily that the young person would be released from custody.
Right.
They just need to be somewhere else for just a minute.
Understood. Thank you.
We kind of have that kind of a relationship with
Okay.
them. So Williamson County does not use us regularly. That's why they have a little star beside their name. So it's 41 and a half.
They're special.
Yes. And then down at the bottom, the grid, the ones that have the asterisk are privately owned and run facilities. They are not governmental.
So those are a list of all of the juvenile detention facilities statewide, and the asterisks represent those that are privately owned and they contract.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Which one of these would you consider most similar to our facility?
Would that be in size or operation?
Both.
So, man, I have so much to say, and I'm not going to say any of it. But I would say probably Davidson, although I'm going to say Davidson and just leave it at that.
Now, wait, let's see. Oh, yeah, here it is. I was looking at Richard Bean. Knox County is Richard Bean, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I actually, they have a fabulous facility. The real difference, besides the number of beds that they have, is that they have a fantastic indoor gymnasium that is better than some of our schools, our local schools.
That's probably because the juvenile judge is a former UT football
Yes.
player and a Minnesota Viking for 20 years.
You think?
Yeah, I think
Well, there you go.
That's
there you have it.
I didn't know that.
Jim Priest.
Okay, so,
And nobody complains about whatever he decides, it's 6'8" or whatever.
Yes, sir. Oh, man, okay.
Thank you.
If there further discussion on item B, contract agencies? If not, we'll move to item C.
okay, so C is educational services and educational programs. There is a lot of information on here. We have a teacher, normally 2 educational assistants, and then we have a Title I specialist that works with our education. The way that the schools have been doing education and how they've kind of morphed is slightly different. And as I have said repeatedly, and I hope you give them an opportunity, I would love for Garland Henley to be able to come and speak to y'all about what they do and how they do education, and then how they are handling the additional programs that go along with education, as far as his the classes that he does and the volunteers that come in, and then he also has Pastor Mike's information on here a little bit, but then I asked them to break out the life skills a little more, because I knew that Ms. Maxwell had brought up the academy, the ManMaker Academy, and when I asked Chaplain, I hope I'm not confusing 2 conversations, but he says, oh, the bishop. So does one of those gentlemen with the ManMaker Academy go by?
I think he might.
Okay,
yes.
so I think he says, oh yeah, we're all over
I
it.
just know
That's
Mr. Johnson, and he goes by the greatness coach. I don't know, but he's got people that help him. He obviously
Right.
can't do this by himself.
So the majority of the education is handled through the Admentum program. But we also, because we work with the Rutherford County Board of Education, we also have special ed that comes in specifically from the Board of Education and works with our special ed kids. School and detention, compared to what they're used to, is generally fun and exciting. We have had multiple kids that have gotten their GED or their high set, or their, depending upon what year it was, some of them actually got diplomas from their home school. So the education services and those programs and Pastor Mike's life skills is a bright, shiny penny, and I would love to let them come and tell you everything there is to know about those programs.
What is, just not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah.
what is the, how many of you would you say of those that have gone on to Motlow, to continuing their education?
We have had young people that not only got their high school education with us, but were enrolled in college classes while they were here. And then the catch is that juvenile detention centers are supposed to be short-term facilities, and for the most part, they are.
Define that, please.
So, okay, yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes, depending upon your charge,
Right.
short-term can turn into years. Okay, if you have a young man or a young lady who is charged with attempted first-degree murder, they're not going to be here for 3 days or a week. They have a lot of court. Court can, their cases are difficult and important and require time. So although it is still considered temporary, these young people need more services than the folks who are here for 72 hours, okay? And so it's those kids, the kids that are here on those serious charges, who don't have a weekend turnaround in and out, who are here for months, years, who are graduating and going on and taking their college classes while they're here. So, I mean, when I average, if I do an average length of stay, I'm averaging less than 24 hours and 2.5 years. So when you ask me what's your average length of stay, if I say 10 days, that's sort of misleading.
It is.
But short term is supposed to be just long enough to get you in front of the judge to have your hearing, and then for him to decide, do we need to hang on to you for a little longer, or are you good to go?
The vast majority move through quickly.
Yes.
Quickly being less than 30 days.
Oh, yes.
When you say vast majority, can you?
75% maybe?
Oh, is Judge still here? Let's see.
It's much higher than
Higher than 75?
90%.
that. Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised when we went on our tour that there was not many children there at all.
Yeah.
That was very
I
encouraging.
think that provides valuable context. And for me, those kind of metrics are particularly important as we begin the process of going through the SOP, because it defines a little bit for us who we're talking about
Well,
in some respects.
I don't have all of the information that
Not
Judge
completely,
Daniel,
but in some respects.
that Judge Daniel asked for, but as an example, this morning, when we set this up, there were 13 young people here. 6 of them were from Rutherford County, 4 from Montgomery, 1 from Sumner, 1 from Haywood, 1 from Madison. The Rutherford County young people, we have 3 charged with first-degree murder, 1 charged with theft over $10,000 and evading arrest, 1 with the aggravated assault, make that 2 with theft over $1,000 and evading. Montgomery County is carjacking and evading arrest, vandalism under $1,000, domestic assault, carjacking again, a domestic assault. Haywood is a first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, aggravated robbery. I mean, these are,
Serious charges.
these are serious charges.
Yeah, yes, sir. Identify yourself, please.
My name is John Cameron.
Thank you, John.
I'm Assistant District Attorney here from Juvenile Court. At one point or another, when you talk about, I've taken Ms. Cullen's position. I'm glad to see her on this board. She will understand a lot of what we deal with that and can help out. At one point, I would like to address this board when it talks about their SOPs. I'm regarding a specific charge that I don't think is getting attention, domestic assault. As you can tell, there's a couple on there. Those weren't from this county. I do not believe that our domestic assaults are even being brought to the magistrates. I could be mistaken on that, but,
Only if they're felony.
and since domestic assault is not a felony, they don't bring it to the magistrate. I'll give you an example. 3 weeks ago, you got a young man, his mom in the face.
Excuse me,
He
sir.
hit his mother in the face, hard, with a fist. Police come, they bring him here. That is not brought to a magistrate to determine whether he stays or goes back. And what happens is they call the mom and say, come pick your kid up. If you look at the history with this child, it's in the one-off. There's an actual gun that he's put to his mother's head before, which is very, very, very serious. And now you have a situation where this young man has hit his mother again. She is scared. She is being told by the detention center that she has to come pick up her child. And on top of that, and this is true, if he does it there, she is also told that if you don't come pick up your child, you will be prosecuted for dependent neglect, and the child will go into state's custody. Now, I understand that there is no legislative law like there is with domestic assaults with adults that has a 24-hour cooling off period. There's no such thing as that, June. However, I would like you to look at your standard operating procedure when it comes to domestic assault. Because under that statute, 37-1114, one of the letters that you look at is the possibility of serious injury. Now, there's a big difference in domestic assaults. One could be he hit his brother because he didn't like it. He was playing with his Xbox controller, which is another case. Obviously, I don't think that's one that should be held, but at the same time, when it's a case like this, in the last 3 weeks, there's 2 mothers that had to make the choice of, I am not picking up my child because I am scared. And they're being now charged with, having to defend a dependent neglect case because they won't. And I think that in the history of these cases of being brought to the magistrates, you might have someone that's held maybe just overnight. I don't know if y'all understand the procedures that are set up. If a child is being brought in and is being held, and they do find a magistrate that under 37-1114 should be held, there is a probable cause here within 72 hours, according to the statute. And we follow that statute thoroughly. I just think that following that statute, when you look at the possibility of serious injury, domestic assault should be considered. I think that needs to be going before a magistrate, even though it is a misdemeanor. So when you...
I think that probably is a legislative determination.
There's nothing in there that says anything about...
I know, but I think that's your argument is a good one to go to the legislature on.
I would agree that for a cooling off period, that's absolutely correct. However, there's nothing that stops a magistrate from holding under the statute 37-1114. And in fact, it directly states possibility of serious physical injury.
So is it the understanding of the chair that there's nothing to preclude the magistrate for holding that young person for a cooling off period, for lack of a better term?
I would not use that term. I disagree with that. I would say no. What I would say is if the statute states that if there's a possibility of serious physical injury and a domestic assault has the possibility of a serious physical injury, it should be being brought to the magistrate. Just because it's a felony or not a felony shouldn't matter. And it doesn't matter according to the statute, but the current standard operating procedure, from what I understand, is if it's not a felony, it's not being brought to the magistrate at all.
That's not my question, though. My question, Mr. Cullum, is would the SOP have the authority to instruct the magistrate to do that? That's my question.
State that again, please, sir.
Would an SOP have the authority to instruct the magistrate to do that?
I think the standard operating procedure that states that only felonies are brought to them is not reading the statute. Part 3 of the statute states that if it's a felony, another part of the statute says a possibility of serious bodily injury. I think that if you just say felony,
I guess my question is I'm not sure, and I'm genuinely not sure what role the SOP has in making that determination. It seems to me you're saying that the SOP, if rewritten or amended, would have that possibility of instructing the magistrate. Did I misunderstand that?
you would have the possibility of allowing misdemeanors to go to the magistrate, if that's your question.
It is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just to clarify.
Yes, Judge.
The SOP, I think his request or his comment is that the SOP is not instructing the magistrate to anything. I don't think this
No.
board has any authority over the magistrate.
That's what I was wondering.
But
No.
the SOP.
Okay, thank you.
The SOP could cause the detention facility to present something to the magistrate.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you for that
Thank you for the
clarification.
clarification.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But still, the magistrate and the judge have to comply with 37-1-114.
Correct.
Yes.
And it's their determination.
Always.
Thank you.
I would just like to comment that I think if we start cherry picking, we roll back into filter system, and it should either be all or nothing.
Thank you.
And I'm fine to call magistrates on everybody that walks in. I think that's a fine way to handle it. But I don't want to be responsible for cherry picking charges. And the only way that we felt like that it would be compliant would be felonies only.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure the board would be like to hear your thoughts on that further, Mr. Cullen, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Cameron. His name is Cameron.
Cameron, my apologies. Thank you, Judge. That's Ms. Cullen, and I'm getting, I'm working on 4 hours of sleep, so y'all, I'm not having a good day, so I beg your indulgence. My apologies. I think that completes our agenda. Do we have any other business or issues before the board or commission?
I would just like to thank the staff for the tour last month. It was very informative, learned a lot. And so that's the only thing I would like to say.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Judge Daniel?
It was very informative, but one question I had is, has there been a determination about the January meeting because of the nature of when the first Monday falls? I believe it falls on the day after the first.
I think it's a holiday.
It's a holiday.
Yeah.
Then we will probably, if there are no objections, we will probably calendar that on the second Monday, if that's, and we will make that determination at the December meeting, if that's acceptable to the board.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay.
I'm
Just
not.
wanted to point that out.
I thank you. I'm not looking that far downstream, although I should. Thank you for that.
You bet.
Without objection, we are adjourned.